Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu states that Hezbollah must be pushed back beyond the Litani River, regardless of any potential ceasefire agreement. An Israeli airstrike in southern Gaza killed at least 7 Palestinians, including children. And pro-Palestinian demonstrators marched through central London in solidarity with those affected by ongoing Israeli strikes on the Gaza Strip. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are now watching Qnews. We begin today's bulletin with the latest developments in Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بيخوف.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated that Hezbollah must be pushed back beyond the Litani River, regardless of any potential ceasefire agreement, to prevent the group from rearming. Netanyahu emphasized that this is essential for restoring peace and security in the north, enabling the return of Israeli settlers to the region, and responding forcefully to any threats against Israel. Lebanese news agency reports that 2 individuals were killed and others were injured in an Israeli airstrike on a town in southern Lebanon. Israeli aircraft also conducted multiple airstrikes targeting the eastern Zotar area and several villages in the Beit Jibeli district. The Israeli Occupation Army has issued new evacuation orders to residents of several buildings in Baalbek, eastern Lebanon, claiming they are near Hezbollah facilities that will be targeted in the near future. This comes after the Israeli army announced the assassination of senior Hezbollah leaders in the Qnews area of southern Lebanon. Israeli occupation forces have issued evacuation orders for residents in Baalbek. The Arabic spokesperson of the Israeli occupation forces posted on X, urging them to evacuate, especially those living in or near specific buildings identified on the attached maps. The Israeli army has launched of 35 rockets towards western Jalili and the Golan Heights, with alarms surrounding in Nahariya and surrounding settlements. Earlier, sirens alerted several northern settlements extending far as Al-Qarmal, southeast of Haifa, and Al-Khudrira, north of Tel Aviv. Hezbollah has announced targeting the Kit-Zerin settlement in the occupied Golan Heights with a barrage of rockets. The group also attacked Israeli troop gatherings in several settlements, asserting that the strikes hit their intended targets accurately. The Israeli army has announced the assassination of senior Hezbollah leaders in the Qnews area of southern Lebanon. The Air Force conducted strikes that resulted in the death of the head of the Qnews compound and a commander in the Radwan force. Both were reportedly responsible for launching projectiles towards towns in Galilee. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard has warned the United States and Israel that Tehran will respond decisively to recent Israeli attacks. In a speech, the commander of the Revolutionary Guard asserted that Iran is prepared for any aggression and noted that Israeli officials violate all international norms and agreements. Tensions escalate in Lebanon and Gaza as Israeli airstrikes devastate civilian areas, overwhelming medical facilities and deepening the humanitarian crisis.
Tensions in Lebanon and Gaza have reached a critical breaking point as Israeli airstrikes persistently target densely populated civilian areas, exacerbating an already dire situation. In Gaza, hospitals and medical facilities are overwhelmed by the relentless bombardment. The territory has been under blockade for nearly 2 decades, and its medical infrastructure is deteriorating rapidly. Facilities are experiencing severe shortages of anesthetics, antibiotics, and other essential supplies. The World Health Organization has issued warnings about a looming health catastrophe, further aggravated by frequent power outages that disrupt life-saving medical equipment. In southern Lebanon, Israeli strikes have caused extensive damage to infrastructure, forcing civilians in border areas to flee their homes. Aid organizations report an acute shortage of shelter, food, and medical care for those displaced, leaving thousands in critical need. The humanitarian crisis continues to deepen as families struggle without access to basic resources or safe havens. International calls for a ceasefire and increased humanitarian aid access are intensifying. The United Nations and other global organizations are urging an end to hostilities, recognizing the urgent need for relief. Both Gaza and Lebanon's already fragile healthcare systems are buckling under the strain of ongoing violence, putting civilian lives at greater risk. With no clear path toward de-escalation, the toll on innocent lives continues to rise, casting a shadow of uncertainty over the region's future.
For more analysis, we now move on to Mona in our newsroom. Mona?
Thank you so much, Rana. And for further analysis on the escalating tensions in Lebanon, we're joined from Beirut by Brigadier General Khalid Hamada, the military and strategic expert. Good evening to you, sir, and welcome to Qnews. Hello. Yes. Sir, how has the confrontation between Israel and Hezbollah evolved in the recent hours?
The conflict between Israel and Hezbollah has really severely escalated over the last few hours. Today, the frictions have become full-sized military confrontation, and previously there were the pages that had been used as explosive devices, and this has obviously caused massive damage among Hezbollah warriors. But then the infrastructure role came, and the infrastructure started to suffer from severe attacks. But today, I can say that things have taken a serious downturn, and I must say that many of these downturns have been through almost a land invasion by Israeli troops to the southern borders within 3 to 4 kilometers into a Lebanese territory, and this is a precedent that is really very heavy in terms of its toll, because previously there were 150 kilometers in-depth penetration by Israeli commandos, but today it is troops that are being present on the ground, And it's obvious that they have a very specific target and agenda. And Hezbollah has been denying any wrongdoing, but it's obvious that this is, as I can say, a very serious downturn in the situation, and I can almost call it a reversal in the role of Israel from self-defense to a frank aggressor. And this is probably an extension of the genocide that I can see, that I have seen elsewhere and the conflict does not seem to come to an end. On the contrary, things have been deteriorating heavily, and it's obvious that every diplomatic effort has failed in this respect. And between Tel Aviv and Washington, I don't see any improvement on that axis in terms of diplomatic intervention. And obviously, the vision of the U.S. administration is about to change. I really don't know, but I can say that President Nabil Berri is severely worried by the current situation. It is truly a very concerning situation and a concerning change in the stance between being in self-defense and turning into an aggressor. And
Yes.
it's obvious that the Lebanese position has not changed. On the contrary, the situation has strongly changed on the Israeli side. And
Indeed. Your Excellency, if I may ask you here, furthermore, Netanyahu has recently visited the Lebanese border. From your point of view, what impact does this visit have or will have on the course of this conflict?
it is obvious that Netanyahu is calling for a war. It is obvious that if Israel is talking about security, it is talking in parallel with staging a full-sized war. And this is happening. Obviously, the target is to destroy the attacking power and of Hezbollah, but it's really a very ferocious war that is bringing really Hezbollah on the verge, on the brink of a full-size war that it is probably trying to avoid. So the military choice remains now the only option now, and I don't think that any diplomatic and efforts would come up with anything positive. It hasn't in Gaza, nor I think will it happen in Lebanon. The violence is really becoming stronger. It's true that Hezbollah is responding, and I would say retaliating with severe rocket fire, missile shooting, but Netanyahu is not willing to give any chance for diplomacy to act. It's obvious that there is a staged war that is about to happen.
Yes, if I may ask you here, how do you think Hezbollah would expand, or really do you expect Hezbollah to expand its attacks in the coming period? And of course, definitely in light of all these circumstances and these escalation.
It goes without saying, you cannot have someone stepping on your toes without responding. Hezbollah is in a very close, is maintaining close ties with Iran and with Khamenei, and And today, the front between Israel and Lebanon is nothing but really a war between Israel and Iran, but with a hidden facade behind the facade. And behind the scene is also the U.S. And I believe that this is a frank violation of the sovereignty of Lebanon, because we are talking of a trans-border attack, and trans-border attack that is really escalating and escalating fast. This is really troublesome, and and I'm sure that unfortunately that it is Lebanon that is paying the high price of this invasion, and I don't think that Hezbollah would be willing to broaden the conflict. But when you talk about self-defense, the only way to defend yourself in this case would be an attack. It is understandable that Hezbollah will respond. Don't forget that the United States is introducing the
Yes.
B-52 fighters, bombers. I mean,
Yes.
this is a very serious
Yes, clear.
escalation of the
Yeah,
fight.
yes, clear, indeed, indeed, indeed. Your point is very clear here, sir, and that was Brigadier General Khalid Hamada, the military and strategic expert. Thank you so much for your insights here. And back to you, Rana.
Thank you very much, Mona, and we are moving on to the latest developments in Gaza. At least 7 Palestinians, including children, have been killed in an Israeli airstrike on the southern Gaza city of Qnews. Injured individuals and the bodies of the deceased were transported to Nasser hospital, where relatives gathered in grief, expressing their anguish through screams and tears. Pro-Palestinian demonstrators have marched through central London in solidarity with those affected by ongoing Israeli strikes on the Gaza Strip. The latest demonstration began around noon, starting from British government buildings and heading to the United States Embassy, with attendance swelling from hundreds to thousands of participants. Carrying Palestinian flags and anti-war banners, the protesters condemned the rise in casualties in Gaza due to Israeli military operations, highlighting the significant death toll among Palestinian children. They called on Britain and the United States to cease arms sales to Israel. Palestinian media have reported that 23 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in the Gaza Strip, including 13 in the northern region. Palestinian civil defense confirmed over 1,300 deaths in northern Gaza in less than a month due to the Israeli assault. 5 Palestinians were killed and several others injured after Israeli shelling that targeted a house in Beit Lahia, while additional strikes in Tel el-Hawa resulted in casualties. Israeli naval forces also bombarded western areas of El Nusrayat camp, and airstrikes targeted multiple locations in northern Gaza. The Palestinian Ministry of Health has urged international and humanitarian organizations to send medical and surgical teams to hospitals in northern Gaza, especially to Kamal Adwan Hospital. The ministry further called for facilitating the arrival of these teams and providing ambulances to transport the wounded and sick to the hospitals. The Palestinian Authority's Commissioner for Detainees Affairs have reported that at least 16 Palestinians, including children and former detainees, were arrested in the West Bank overnight. Since the onset of the Israeli assault, over 11,500 Palestinians from the West Bank, including Jerusalem, have been detained. Families of Israeli hostages have accused Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of undermining detainees' exchange deals, claiming that he is the main obstacle to their return. In a statement, they alleged that Netanyahu is pursuing partial agreements to any comprehensive deal, prioritizing his personal interests over the captives' fates. Philippe Lazzarini, the Commissioner General of UNRWA, has called for an end to the conflict in Gaza and has condemned the Israeli ban on his organization. He stressed that dismantling UNRWA would deprive Palestinian children of education for the foreseeable future, emphasizing that reaching an agreement to end the war is the only way to bring hundreds of thousands of children currently living in the rubble back to school. UNICEF has called for the immediate cessation of attacks on civilians and humanitarian workers in Gaza. UNICEF Executive Director Catherine Russell urged Israel to investigate the circumstances surrounding the attack on one of its staff members in Jabalia. She warned that recent weeks have seen a surge of violence in northern Gaza, putting all residents, especially children, at imminent risk for disease, famine, and ongoing bombardment. The World Health Organization has reported that an attack on a polio vaccination site in northern Gaza has left 6 people injured, including 4 children. The incident took place at Sheikh Radwan Primary Health Care Center, where parents had gathered to vaccine their children. According to the World Health Organization, a humanitarian ceasefire had been agreed upon to ensure safe vaccination efforts, but the site was struck regardlessly. World Health Organization Director General described the incident as extremely concerning, but did not specify responsibility for the attack. Today marks the end of the 3rd phase of the 2nd round of emergency polio vaccination campaign in the Gaza city. The campaign has not been extended to northern Gaza, which is currently under intense Israeli siege. Starting last Saturday, the campaign aimed to vaccinate children under 10 years old and has provided the 2nd dose of the vaccine. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we have been covering. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu states that Hezbollah must be pushed back beyond the Litani River, regardless of any potential ceasefire agreement. An Israeli airstrike in southern Gaza killed at least 7 Palestinians, including children. And pro-Palestinian demonstrators marched through central London in solidarity with those affected by ongoing Israeli strikes on the Gaza Strip. This concludes our news bulletin for this hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.